Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper as listed. I beg your pardon. Madam President, thank you. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Civil Aviation Act, Chapter 4903, be now read a second time. Madam President, as I said in the other place, the privilege falls to me, for which I am grateful, to pilot this bill, having been asked by my colleague, the Minister of Works and Transport, to pilot the bill in the other house as he was attending to urgent business of the state. I am privileged today to stand in his stead to continue to pilot this bill. The bill, Madam President, provides for an amendment to the Civil Aviation Act, Chapter 4903. By Clause 3 of that bill, it seeks to delete Subclause 2 of Clause 2 of the first schedule, thereby removing the limit of 2 consecutive terms for members of the board of that authority. Clause 2, Subclause 2 of the first schedule states, quote, "No member of the board other than the Director General shall hold office for more than 2 consecutive terms." The aim of Clause 3 of the bill, Madam President, is to amend Clause 2 of the first schedule by deleting Subclause 2. The aim of that deletion is to ensure in the board of the authority the continued availability to this country and the aviation regulatory industry of suitably qualified, experienced, and competent persons. Very importantly, Madam President, the need for this amendment is to be considered in the context of Section 14A of the Act, and I take the trouble, with your leave, to read that section as it presently obtains as part of the law of the Civil Aviation Act. Quote, "No member or former member shall accept employment or enter into a contract of service with an entity regulated by the authority until the expiry of 2 years from the termination of his appointment, whether by signature, revocation, effluxion of time, or otherwise." Unquote. The significance of that section, therefore, being that at the end of the 2 consecutive terms of office of the board, that is to say, by effluxion of time, the country is not able to have the benefit, and indeed the members of the board are not able to benefit from continued employment in the country as members of a highly specialized industry. They are actually debarred from being employed after they have their term has expired by effluxion of time. What that has meant, Madam President, is that in particular, having regard to the small society that we have the privilege to be part of, Trinidad and Tobago, with its limited population, and the highly specialized nature of the particular skill that comes to the board, the skill of avionics, avionic risk management, and others, it means that persons are loath to take up employment as members of a board, which will result in them not being able to return into the public and to continue to be employed for a period of as long as 2 years, given that they have already served 2 years on the board of the Civil Aviation Authority. So that is a significant consideration that has to be taken into account as we look at the need for the amendment, which I move today before this Honourable House. And may I say, Madam President, to address a concern that was uttered in the other place, there has been no dereliction of duty on the part of this government to be bringing this bill before this House at this stage. The point there being that the term of office of the members of the board expired in September of this year. We are in November. But the attention of the government has been engaged since January of this year in attempting to find and place in office members of a board to replace those members whose term expired in September 2022. In point of fact, there has been an attempt by the government to seek for further amendments, more holistic amendments of the Act, and the issue that is before us today, that is to say, deleting Section 2 of Clause 2 of the first schedule, is one of a number of issues that actually was referred by the government through the Office of the Attorney General to the Law Reform Commission, and that Law Reform Commission has produced a policy document which is going to inform subsequent approaches to this House, once approved by Cabinet, for more holistic amendments to the Civil Aviation Act, which I dare say in due course will be asking this court to address Section 14A. Madam President, the Civil Aviation Authority is a body that is incorporated by statute. It is established under the Civil Aviation Act and is charged with responsibility for regulating all civil aviation activities within Trinidad and Tobago. The authority acts as the main liaison between Trinidad and Tobago, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and national civil aviation authorities of other countries. Pursuant to Section 11(1) of the Act, the business of the authority is managed by a board of directors comprising 8 persons, appointed by the President in accordance with the provisions of the first schedule, and the Director General appointed in accordance with Section 13, who shall be an ex officio member. It is important to appreciate, Madam President, that of the 8 members of the board, 2 are mandatory. One is to be nominated from the Tobago House of Assembly. The other is to be nominated from the Environmental Management Authority. Significantly, of the remaining 6, the section of the schedule prescribes that the President is required to appoint, and I quote here, 6 suitably qualified persons with proven experience in the fields of civil aviation, law, financial management, economics, or human resource management. I emphasize by repetition, suitably qualified persons with proven experience in the field of civil aviation. Madam President, the reality is that the board of the Civil Aviation Authority would be significantly handicapped to the point of being non-functional if that board were not able to recruit to its resources the skills and proven competence and experience of persons who are qualified in and have had experience in the field of civil aviation. That informs the rationale, Madam President, for the amendment which we seek of this House today. The civil aviation industry is a highly technical and specialized field. The board is charged with critical responsibilities for regulatory and air navigation services in its management of the authority. Among the responsibilities with which the board is charged is the preparation of a corporate plan with respect to corporate management programs and goals of the authority, to include, among other things, the analysis of risk factors likely to affect aviation safety in the aviation industry, not only over the skies of Trinidad and Tobago, but in the skies through which the planes which depart and return to Trinidad and Tobago are to be regulated. And that board is to keep the minister apprised throughout the term of the board with respect to the realization of its corporate plan, so that one has to have an ongoing attention and detail to the specialized skill of civil aviation in the composition and capacity of the board properly to serve its statutory mandate. The authority, Madam President, is responsible as a national entity for a number of critical matters. When one looks at Section 5 of the Act, one sees that it is charged with the responsibility to maintain a standard of safety and efficiency in the civil aviation system that is at least equal to the standard of safety prescribed by the International Convention on Civil Aviation, the Chicago Convention, with 193 state parties, which includes all member states of the United Nations. The board has an onerous and grave responsibility. The Chicago Convention defines the minimum accepted prescribed standards and recommended practices that a large section of the international community has acceded to. The authority is also required to keep in sight all other aviation conventions, international agreements or understandings to which the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago is a party, in order to ensure this country's continued compliance with such agreements and to review these treaties and agreements to which the state has yet to accede and to recommend which ones should be ratified. Indeed, Madam President, pursuant to Section 8.2 of the Act, the authority is to provide advice and to develop sustainable aviation practices for the national sector in a manner that ensures, so far as practicable, that the environment is protected from detrimental effects associated with the operation and use of aerodrome and aircraft. Among the items which the board is charged to pay particular attention to, Madam President, are the licensing, inspection, and regulation of navigation aerodromes, the issuing of certificates of airworthiness, the certification of air operators, the certification of airmen. One only has to reflect within the last couple of years to some of those most tragic circumstances of airworthiness or lack thereof, which...
If I could, thank you, AG. Through you, Madam President, just 3 quick questions for clarity. Is it that the rationale for these amendments is or are prompted by a lack of options to sit on the board moving forward, given that we would have known the terms of the present members of the board were coming up under the regime of this present act of 2 years? And if that is so, what is the main reason? Is the reason that the prohibition of the 2-year term that a sitting member cannot work in the industry or sector related to the industry? And also, finally, what are the implications for that in the context of the removal of this? Does it mean that the members can sit indefinitely if we remove this? And what are the transparency and accountability mechanisms or related issues where that is concerned?
Thank you, Senator Richards. I'll try to address the questions as I attempted to take a note of them. In terms, if I may deal with the last first, in terms of transparency related to indefinite terms, I don't think that the amendment, should we vote for it today and affirm it into law, is going to mean that the members of the board will sit until they expire.
Sorry, thank you, Madam President. Just one interjection. I meant that at some point, the board will need new people. People pass on, people resign. So if we can't get new people now, apparently, what is going to fix that in the long term? This measure seems a short-term measure.
Well, not necessarily, Mr. Senator Richards, because one of the things that I was going to come to, and I'll come to it immediately, is that the mandatory qualifications and proven experience component that is required by the legislation will allow a board that is extended beyond its 2 terms, consisting of persons who are already of proven experience, to mentor a younger person who may have come onto the board, because it's not as if all the members of the board are automatically replaced, so that one can bring younger persons who are in the civil aviation industry and get the mentoring on the board from those who are already part of the civil aviation industry, so that in due course the younger persons can remain and the older ones can move on. So I don't know if that addresses your question. But going back to the very first question, that is to say the lack of options, it is not that there was a lack of options in the years that the government appreciated that the board needed to be replaced. Attempts were made to find persons, and I know that the Minister of Works will speak to that, and the bottom line is that the cadre was so small and remains so small that it was not possible at this point to be able to have a board of suitably proven persons of experience and competence to continue beyond the September deadline. Thank you. If I may continue, Madam President. So, as I was saying, Madam President, the board must continuously be competent in areas that touch and concern aviation, including aviation risk management, in order to effectively discharge its governance options. In a population as small as Trinidad and Tobago, this means that the cadre of qualified persons, appropriately qualified and competent, ready and available to serve on the board, can be challenging, and that is the experience that the government has had. That cadre is made even smaller from the highly specialized aviation field by the limitation imposed by Section 14A, not allowing persons to return to employment in their specialized area of expertise after their term on the board has expired, so that persons are reluctant to step forward to offer themselves given the guillotine effect of their term of office having expired and not being able to return to their highly experienced area chosen as their profession. It is in this context, therefore, that it is recommended that the limit of the 2 terms be deleted to allow the board to continue to draw on and to benefit from the experience and competence of serving members, specialized and experienced in the field of civil aviation in particular. The suggested amendment, Madam President, allows the board to operate with the required expertise while paving the way, and this is what I just addressed in my answer to Senator Richards, while paving the way for new talent to be sourced through a mixture of both old and newer members, allowing the transfer of knowledge on the board in its evolving competence without limiting the board unduly. The amendment of the term of office to delete the 2 terms therefore allows the business of the board to continue while new members can continue to be sourced and mentored during the currency of the board as it evolves. Urgency, Madam President, is therefore a watchword that I urge on my colleagues in this chamber today, given the fact that the term of office of the last board expired in September of this year. That cannot be understated, having regard to the responsibilities that the board is statutorily charged with to maintain risk avoidance in its discharge of its civil aviation responsibilities. It is of the utmost importance that the board comprises suitably qualified, experienced, and competent persons. It is therefore evident in my respectful submission, Madam President, that the proposed amendment is necessary to ensure the continued safe operations, and I stress the word safe operations, of the authority over the airspace of this republic, consistent with its statutory mandate and in the public interest. And I beg to move.
Honourable Senators, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Civil Aviation Act, Chapter 4903, be now read a second time. Senator John.